In today's game, Bobby Fischer shows us the importance of color in the game of chess, namely the fact that there are two types of squares on the board. There are the light squares and the dark squares. And knowing how to dominate one of those, either the light or the dark, can be the key to success in chess. His opponent in this game is Grandmaster Robert Byrne, the brother of Donald Byrne, also an opponent of Fischer in a number of games. Robert Byrne in this game has the white pieces. Fischer has black, and it is really an amazing a strategic achievement of Fischer. And let us watch how he dominates one of the colors in this game. Robert Byrne begins with d4. Fischer plays knight to f6, c4, g6, and g3. This is usually played when you want to avoid the sharper lines of the King's Indian. Maybe you want to suffocate black and keep him from getting his active counterplay. Fischer plays c6. Now, this transposes to a line of the Grunfeld, and traditionally, this is seen as a safer move. The idea is that black will play d5, get a strong point on d5, and there will be basically a symmetrical position, and white's bishop on g2 will bite on granite on d5. That's the idea, but this game explodes. Byrne plays bishop to g2, Fischer plays d5, just as we said, creating the strong point on d5 and cd5, cd5. Essentially, it's like an exchange Slav, but with both sides having Payan Kedot on the king's side. Knight to c3, bishop to g7, e3. That does block in the dark squared bishop, but it also creates a strong point on d4 for white. Castling and knight g to e2. He plays this knight to a little bit more passive square, but he keeps his own bishop unblocked, and he keeps these knights connected. Knight to c6 from Fischer. Now his knights are a little more aggressively posted. Castles. And Fischer has one minor piece left to develop, his c8 bishop. But where should he put it? Should he put it on f5 or put it on g4? Those may look good, but what purpose does a bishop serve on one of those two squares? Fischer comes up with another idea. He plays the move b6. And we can already see in white's position that the light squares are weak. Right, all the pawns are on dark squares, but his light squares are weak, and his bishop normally would be on f1, controlling this diagonal, but it's shifted to g2. So Fischer says, then I'll take control of that diagonal because white has given it up, and he controls a powerful light square diagonal, and of course this square d3 could become important. b3, white does something similar, but of course he has no choice, his bishop is blocked in. Bishop a6, bishop to a3, but notice Fischer has not moved his e-pawn yet. White already moved his pawn, so he plays rook to e8. The idea is to break in the center. Now, what justification does he have for doing that? Well, his pieces are a little more actively posted. It's going to be harder for white's rooks to become active, whereas after a quick e5, Fischer's pieces become much more active than white's. Even though white is developed, Fischer's pieces are just better placed and more actively placed. Queen to d2 from Byrne, and now e5. Black opens up the center to take advantage of his better placed pieces. He's not worried about this bishop, and he'd like to maybe open up this diagonal so his own bishop at g7 could extend down this diagonal, maybe put some pressure on d4. But Byrne goes ahead and takes on e5. Knight takes e5. So right now, Bobby Fischer has an isolated queen's pawn, but he has a lot of dynamic compensation. And remember, this bishop on a6 designed to dominate the dark squares, this knight can jump right into that d3 square. It won't be supported by a pawn, but it will be supported by a piece, the bishop at a6. Rook f to d1 to increase the pressure against the isolated pawn, but then knight to d3. This knight, it's a support point in a way. The pawn doesn't support it, but the bishop does. And it's a very irritating knight for white to have to deal with. How does he get it out of there? I mean, the bishop on a6 is really a strong piece supporting that knight. But Fischer doesn't intend to leave it there, as we will see. Queen to c2 from Byrne. Now, when your opponent is weak on one color complex, in this case, again, the light squares, sometimes attacking the squares which they are strong on can cause the whole position to collapse. So Fischer's next move is really an astonishing tactical blow, really just a brilliant shot. He plays the move knight takes f2, which looks like, I mean, it's almost like a blunder, right? You have this beautiful knight. You're giving it up for only a pawn. Well, what compensation does he get? Well, now he's really able to dominate the light squares after that move. King takes f2, knight to g4, check. Hits the king. He also hits this pawn at e3. If the king moves to f3, then rook takes e3, check. And if king takes knight, then this move, bishop to c8, check. Hits the king, and the king goes to f4. Bishop to h6 is checkmate. So that's the threat on the board. If white ignores the knight and just moves the king up, that doesn't change anything. You just reverse the moves. Bishop h6, king takes, bishop c8, and white could block once with the bishop, and then with the queen, then it would still be mate. So because of that, the king goes back to g1. But now knight to e3. And we see Fischer threatening to regain some of the material he's given up. He has 2 pawns for the knight, and he's forking the queen and the rook. The queen moves to d2. Now, the most natural move here seems to be to take the rook at d1. A rook is worth more than a knight, right? But Fischer knows that more important than that rook are the light squares. So what he does is he takes the bishop that defends the light squares off of the board. So now the light squares are incredibly weak. He doesn't even have a bishop to defend them, Grandmaster Byrne. King to g2, and now clear, beautiful strategy from Bobby Fischer. d4. The purpose? To open up this diagonal. The bishop at a6 can shift back to b7 and attack the king and aim right at these light squares. After knight takes d4, bishop to b7, check. The king has some options here. If he goes to g1, then bishop takes d4, check. Queen takes, and then this nice move, rook to e1, check. This is a common tactical theme. If rook takes e1, Fischer would win the queen. And if the king moves, then queen takes, rook takes queen, and then he would lose the rook. So he would lose material either way. If instead king to h3, then queen to d7, check. And he's in huge trouble. He could block with g4, but then h5, threatening queen takes, pawn mate. Rook to g1 to defend, but pawn takes, rook takes. Then bishop to c8, again on the light squares. The pinned rook, rook a to g1, but then just bishop takes knight. And that's it, because the rook can't retake here, right? If white were to play queen takes, he just take the queen, and there's nothing the rook can do because it's pinned. So because of that, after bishop to b7 check, Byrne plays king to f1, but Fischer only has one more move in the game, and that's simple. Queen to d7, with the clear intention of queen to h3 check, which would decide the game on the spot. And there's nothing white can do to prevent this from ending the game. Some sample lines given by Bobby Fischer himself here. If queen to c2, queen to h3 check, king to g1, and then this brilliant shot. He wanted to play this in the game. He said he was very disappointed that Byrne resigned. Rook to e1 check. Now, what's the point behind this move? It's to distract the rook from the knight on d4. Rook takes rook, bishop takes d4 check, and that leads to a forced mate. He can block once with the rook. Then when he blocks with the queen, you just play mate. Play queen to g2 mate. The queen can't do anything about it because it's pinned by the bishop. Another line given by Fischer is knight d to b5, queen to h3 check, king to g1, then bishop to h6. The same idea. He's gaining a tempo on the queen, and then when the queen moves, the bishop's still coming. So if the queen moves, again, bishop to e3 check, and after the forced blocking, boom, mate. Yeah, Fischer said he was bitterly disappointed that Byrne resigned after queen to d7. But an amazing game, a Brilliancy Prize winner, and really shows how you can dominate one color complex in a position and, in this case, tear apart a grandmaster opponent. Well, Fischer could do it anyway. Thank you for joining us at Chess Dog. See you again soon. Bye.